Hello everyone, I'm Corey and we're talking Manpower. Today I'm with Ms. Karen Taylor. She's the Chief of the Manpower and NATO Agreements Division for U.S. European Command and she's based out of Stuttgart, Germany. Ms. Taylor, thank you very much for being here today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So explain to me a little bit about what you do at EUCOM.
At EUCOM, I am responsible for a team of 15 people, and we manage the joint manpower programs for Headquarters U.S. European Command and for the U.S. contribution to NATO. That's about 5,500 billets on 2 joint tables of distribution, and for EUCOM, the joint table of mobilization distribution, the reserve manning in times of crisis.
That sounds very, very complicated. So what are the unique benefits and challenges of doing manpower and force management at a combatant command?
One of the challenges is, unlike the Army, unlike the services, the manpower standards that are outlined in the instructions and the joint instructions for the combatant commands are very open. We don't have standards. And so on the one hand, that gives us a lot of flexibility, gives the commander a lot of flexibility to organize how he wants. On the other hand, the manpower analysts have a huge open book that people want to do different things to that aren't maybe appropriate in terms of minimum manpower standards. So it can be challenging in suppressing the appetite to do things that we shouldn't be doing.
But it kind of helps foster creativity in a way because it's like, well, we don't really have strict instructions on how to do it, so let's figure out a way.
Well, and that's what one of the benefits is. It's not only challenging, but you have more flexibility, more ability to structure the things the way that need to be structured in support of the mission. It's not as slow of a process as maybe it is in the services.
So, here at headquarters, manpower and force management decisions are felt every day because it's, they're just a couple floors away. So how does the leadership's decisions here at headquarters affect you on your day-to-day missions?
The same congressional decisions and OSD decisions that affect the Army affect the combatant commands. And I think the biggest one that's happening right now is the NDAA said we are going to cut 25% across the department. So just as the Army within the big Army, the proper Army is trying to figure out how do we make those cuts and where do we make those cuts, we're doing the same thing in the combatant commands. How do we cut 25% of our military manpower to meet congressional intent to downsize?
Is there any sort of delay from when Congress makes the decision to when you get word of the news? I mean, obviously there's the time difference, but does that play a role at all? The kind of the delay and
well, what it makes all of us doing, whether we are working for the Army or working for a combatant command, is you have to stay knowledgeable about these kinds of decisions. You have to look at the NDAA. You have to try to say what are the impact and then work with, in our case, with the Joint Staff to say, how is this going to be interpreted? How is it going to come down? And what are the expectations of the combatant commands? Which is the same thing at Big Army in the high levels they're doing with OSD and with their leadership as well.
So I know you touched on this a little bit earlier, but what are the types of projects that you and your team are currently working on?
Downsizing in response to congressional and OSD direction. We are also preparing for a joint manpower study that the Air Force is going to lead. However, we are going to have representatives from the Navy and the Army, 12 people, because what we've asked for is, with all the changes going on, we believe we need to re-baseline what kind of manpower we need at EUCOM. And so they are going to come in for 6 weeks in April and May and do a top-to-bottom joint manpower study to help us baseline our manpower.
So since you work with the different services on a day-to-day basis, or at least a regular basis, how do they kind of do it differently than the Army do?
The Army is more structured, and you have an annual update. The Air Force is supposed to, of your manpower documents, and you have the G3 involved, whereas the Air Force, it's through the A1 channels not through their A3, and we have a little bit more flexibility in terms of doing things out of cycle than we do in the Army. That said, the Army is more flexible on the people side. The Air Force is more rigid in the assignments of people to those billets, whereas the Army says, okay, we know it's coming on the books, we'll help you combatant command. So there are pros and cons from our perspective in the different services.
And to touch on, to just kind of buoy off of that a little bit, how is it doing manpower in an organization such as NATO? Because obviously you're in Germany, and my assumption would be you'd have to work with other manpower analysts from other various NATO partners. So is that challenging, and what kind of benefits and challenges do you derive from that?
It's fascinating, in my opinion. So NATO is an alliance of 28 nations, including the United States. 26 of those nations give permanent manpower to alliance command structures, to the military structure. They have their own, the NATO Defense Manpower Audit Authority that does the validation of manpower, just as the services and the Joint Staff, really more the services have. But all the decisions that go into these manpower, let me give you an example. When NATO creates a new structure, and they say, here's our new structure, initially there are no nations assigned to those billets. And we have to go through a process, every nation, and we represent the U.S., where we bid for billets. And so we say, I want that billet for the United States. And somebody else says, no, I want that billet for Spain. And so we have to negotiate for billets, which I think is really one of the most interesting parts of what we do. The other thing is, when NATO comes up with a new structure, all 28 nations have to agree to it. And so they have to send it out to all the nations and get consensus, which is, imagine the bureaucracy we have in the Army or the Joint Staff times 28.
Yeah, I can imagine that, because they've all got different competing things from their own governments and the way they look at the world.
Right.
So how has working overseas helped you develop as a manpower force manager?
Well, I began my CP26 career overseas and at a very senior level. So I've had a unique opportunity to see the strategic functions of manpower, both in NATO and in the combatant command. And in fact, I just talked to you about the ability to see how does NATO, how does the alliance do that. What I miss coming in at this senior level are the basics. And in fact, that's why I have learned who runs the CP26, how can I do education to get those basics, because it's actually never too late to do that, so that I can prepare myself for coming back and reintegrating into the big Army and add value someplace in a position in the Army.
So, from my understanding, having spoken to Mr. Lampesberger, the UCOM regularly hosts the Army's Manpower and Force Management course. Why does UCOM do this, and why do you feel that the course is important?
Well, several years ago, I learned about the Manpower and Force Management course. That's one of the negatives, not learning about the MFC, but being in a COCOM, and it was recommended that I go to the course, and I was Mr. Lampesberger told me I was the most senior person ever to go to his course. But that said, I learned a tremendous amount. The course does a great job, and I've been to War College, but it does a great job of linking national military strategy down to what we do as manpower and force management analysts. So I was very impressed with that, which was a refresher for me, but it was very good for the more junior people. And then it taught me the basics of manpower and force management, and I realized my people at the COCOM needed to have this course. We had some end-of-year money. I invited Mr. Lampesberger out. The course came to Stuttgart. We had initially 16 people because it was a last minute. And then he asked me, did I want to host it the following year? And I said, absolutely. Now, I've tried to be a very honest, not tried, we're honest brokers, because USEER wants to get in the course, all the others. So it's not a UCOM hosts it, but that doesn't mean we get first pick at who goes. Everybody in Europe has an equal opportunity to go to the course. It's an Army course, not a UCOM course.
So you're able to use the negotiation skills that you used with the Spanish about the NATO billets when you're trying to get seats in the Manpower Force Management course.
Exactly. So we've been very, very happy to host it and have the upcoming course in June as well.
So what would your advice be to someone who's looking for an opportunity in Germany as a Manpower Force Manager, and how can they best prepare for it?
They can best prepare by learning their core skills, especially if they want to come to a headquarters such as a combatant command, and I would suspect even USEER, because what we need at those levels are the core skills, because you will learn the strategic mission by doing it and by other people who are there. But if we don't have the people with the analytical skills we need, then we won't be able to do our job. So that's when I'm hiring, that's what I'm looking for. People not who understand UCOM, but people who understand Manpower. So get your education, go to the courses, take advantage of any opportunity you can for the Manpower and Force Management course, for CP26 funding, and get all the education you can and learn your basic skills in your service. You'll learn, if you come to a combatant command, you'll learn the other services. That's part of your experience in coming to a combatant command. If you knew those things ahead of time, you wouldn't need to come.
And is there anything else that you'd like to add?
I think this is an excellent opportunity. I think Career Program 26 is, I've been an HR specialist before. I would take Career Program 26 any day. Sorry, HR specialists. I think it's more tied to the strategic level, incredibly fascinating, and a great career in the Army.
Well, Ms. Taylor, I know you're very busy, and I appreciate you being here today. So I know you're based in Germany, so I'm going to say Dankeschön for joining us. And until next time, Auf Wiedersehen.
Thank you.
Well, everyone, that's all we have time for today. Thank you all for listening. We look forward to our next segment. In the meantime, feel free to like the Manpower and Force Management page on Facebook. And until then, have a great Army Day.